Okay, fine. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Obviously, Jordan Peterson remains for me based and a societally necessary figure in the public arena. And the purpose of this video is to illustrate and exemplify one of the core ideas he lays out in his philosophical work in Maps of Meaning. So this will be much more than just commentary about his antics on Twitter, which, to be honest, I've done before and isn't that interesting, but is relevant, unfortunately, in the current context. This video is about the role that younger generations have in carrying forward and embodying the ideas that they inherit from their teachers, their elders, or their culture. The whole memeified Jordan Peterson idea of rescuing your father from the belly of the whale is exactly that. So consider the following excerpt from a classic Peterson lecture about this idea and see if the clips that I mix into it fall in line with what he's saying.
So anyways, Geppetto is feeling pretty hopeless because he can't figure out any way of getting out of the whale, and he's also starving. He's starving in the belly of the whale. Here's a way of thinking about that. Geppetto's a good guy, but he's old. And that means his way of doing things is no longer fruitful. That's why he's starving. Twitter's a rat hole in the final analysis, and I have probably contributed to that. No doubt, I owe some apologies for that, and I'm trying to learn. And it's especially not fruitful because he's missing his son. He's missing the active element that the child represents, say the playful and transformative element that the child represents.
I'm not very agreeable.
Right. I've noticed that actually in this conversation. At least and I'm sure it served your career well. What rules, you sons of bitches? Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who. And so if you get stuck doing something the same old way, at some point it's no longer going to work, even if it was good at some point.
So let's dig in a bit more here and see if I'm actually wrong about any of this. Let's do a Petersonian analysis. Who is Jordan Peterson? He is a university professor, so he's a teacher, an educator, a steward of the cultural traditions of which our entire society is nested in and depends upon. And it's pretty clear, to me at least, that he genuinely wants the best for people, and I'm confident that if more people in power were like Jordan Peterson, society would be way better off. So because of all this, he is someone who very easily constellates the archetype of the wise old man. You know, the Gandalf figure, the Dumbledore figure, Ned Stark, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's very easy to project onto him the positive aspect of culture. And that's why he, in many ways, is like Geppetto.
And he's good at making things, and he's got a sense of humor, and he's kind of playful, and so he's the good father, fundamentally. He's the wise king. He's the positive archetype of the masculine. And that's what he is. And so he's culture in its positive manifestation.
But as you may know, the problem with culture is that it also has a negative side. And that negative side manifests itself when the culture becomes corrupt and stagnant and outdated. When some of the wisdom of the past no longer maps onto the present environment. Because the present environment has transformed so dramatically from the previous past environment of which that acquired wisdom was applicable to. This is what Peterson talks about in the story of Osiris, and this is also what Brett Weinstein points out from an evolutionary perspective.
Here's how the story goes. Osiris is a great king. He established the Egyptian state. You could think about him as the embodiment of Egyptian custom and tradition, all right? But he was great when he was young, but he's not young anymore. He's old, and he's willfully blind. And what that means is that he doesn't see what he could see. He refuses to see what he could see. Why is Osiris old and willfully blind? Because that's what culture is. It's a paternal spirit that's old and willfully blind, and it's always that way.
But you have a parallel problem. It looks to me like the exact mirror image, which is that you've got an integrative, long-term measure of well-being instantiated in an evolutionary belief system, but it's coming apart because we are living in circumstances that are less well mirrored. The present does not mirror the past, and therefore these truths which you believe are timeless are degrading rapidly.
That's part of that's exactly right, yes.
Okay, so what Sam is arguing is that the tools to pivot in order to improve our way of interacting, those are not the tools of long-standing tradition. Those are the tools of rational engagement.
Respect for that process is part of the long-standing tradition.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, but that's a big truth, man.
I agree.
That's a major league truth.
I
and
agree.
In fact, I would say the fundamental tradition, the most fundamental tradition of the West, says that respect for the process that updates moral judgment is the highest of all possible values.
Respect for the process of updating moral judgments is of the highest possible values. In other words, there is great value and necessity of constructively criticizing your own culture when it begins to decay. And that's what it means to rescue the father from the belly of the whale, to separate the wheat from the chaff, to separate the timeless lessons of the past from the outdated lessons of the past. And that's what I try to do when I criticize Peterson for engaging in behaviors that are not optimal for the current environment, like spending all of his time on Twitter like the degenerate basement dwellers that he's supposed to be helping by providing, nuanced, articulated, interesting, sophisticated psychological advice, not calling people scum rats or miserable creatures or kettles of fish, whatever the fuck that means. It just doesn't seem to make sense. And for as wise as Peterson is, he appears to be willfully blind in this regard. I get he has a point about Twitter enables psychopathic behavior, so we have to figure out a way to deal with that as a society. I agree. You don't do it by engaging with the trolls. You don't do it by being a elite top-tier psychologist arguing with anonymous troll demons on their own turf. The one area in which you're going to look like a fool arguing with them is in the Twitter sphere, which is 250 character limit, fortune cookie level exchanging ideas. This is the willful blindness of Osiris that Peterson is in part embodying with this suboptimal behavior that he knows is suboptimal and yet for some reason allows himself to get sucked into. And the reason I think it's important to criticize him for this is because I genuinely believe his ideas are necessary. There is great wisdom in the past of which he is trying to communicate, and it's important for those ideas and that wisdom to reach as many people as possible. Most importantly, the people who don't already agree with him.
You've experienced so much fucking undeserved hate from the left that it's positioned you as with some resentment, which is reasonable. I don't know how you're even still having like the common debate and discourse. Like if most people in your situation, they would just say, F them, screw them, whatever. But your information is more important to the people who don't agree with you than the ones who already agree. You know what I'm saying? Like explaining the value of, let's say, God. I'm not someone who's raised with religion, but I believe in the power of it. And so explaining the power of God to someone who is not religious is more important than to the believer.
I want people like Andrew Schultz or Bill Maher or the former iCarly star Jeanette McCurdy or the self-described bisexual light side Jordan Peterson, CJ the X, taking Jordan Peterson's ideas and sharing them with their audiences, diffusing those ideas into the broader culture where they can take hold and work on their own.
It is subjective what you make of Jordan's intentions and philosophies and the directions they're supposed to take you. However, his impact is meaningful to discuss in objective terms. Consensus defines effect. So with all these caveats out of the way, the point is I want to show a Jordan Peterson clip in a positive light.
And every time Peterson tweets something that is so out of touch, like saying that people who use LMFAO, that's a marker for narcissism. It's like, I get it, but that's such a boomer take. And I think there's so many average people, for better or worse, this is just the way that the world works. There's so many people who will hear that take, and even if there is a good point behind it, just go, you know what, I just am not going to take this guy seriously. And I just think it impedes his ability to communicate. Now, this does not mean that Peterson should stop going after the psychopathic and parasitic ideas that are infesting our culture, the ones, but he should, in my opinion, reflect on the fact that for as wise and intelligent and as capable as he is, he has enough on his plate on the intellectual and philosophical front that he can probably leave the problem of figuring out how to deal with the psychosocial demonic forces emerging from the deepest pits of hell that we call Twitter to someone else. Okay? Not me, but someone else. So don't call me Pinocchio. Call me PF. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, good luck and Godspeed.